Mark Okoth Obama Ndesandjo may be known to many as the half-brother of American President Barack Obama. But Mark is a talented and accomplished man in his own right. Mark is American, though he was raised in Kenya. He graduated from Brown with 2 undergraduate degrees and obtained a Master of Physics at Stanford and an executive MBA degree from Emory University in Atlanta. For 7 years, Mark has lived in Shenzhen, China, where he spends his time consulting, writing, and volunteering his time teaching orphans how to play piano. Mark is married, speaks fluent Mandarin, and his passions include piano and calligraphy. Mark, thanks for sitting down with us today.
Thank you, Dan. I'm very glad to be here.
We're grateful that you're speaking with us today.
No problem.
Last week you held a press conference in Guangzhou, China to talk about your new novel, Nairobi to Shenzhen.
Yes.
I think many, including me, were expecting to hear you talk about an autobiography and not a novel. With all your life experiences and accomplishments, why didn't you write an autobiography?
Okay. First of all, Dan, thank you. Honestly, thank you for letting me talk to your newspaper, because I do have great respect for your newspaper. You know, it's interesting you mentioned that about the book. I've been working on this book for about, gosh, it's been about maybe 10 years or so. And I've always been writing. And in fact, the writing is I've always been about self-expression. And writing has been one of them. With all the experiences that I've actually had, coming from a multiracial family, born in Kenya, living and working in America and China, and also being in different experiences, for example, family issues and family situations. But I think one thing is that I started to write this book as an autobiography. And what happened is that as I was writing it, I started to ask myself about my father. The novel itself is a work of fiction, but it draws very heavily from my own experiences, particularly my father, my mother, myself, and my grandmother. That said, when I started to write the autobiography, I wanted to write about my father as well. But the thing is that because I had had a very negative experience of my life with him, as you know, I had what I believe was a one-sided view of him. I saw a one-sided view in the sense that I could not remember good things about my father because of the hurt that I had actually gone through when I was very, very young.
And for people who don't know that hurt, what can you tell them about this hurt that you experienced?
Well, the novel, just to retract, the novel is a story about an English teacher who goes to China after 9/11, on the eve of a terrifying global war. He falls in love with a beautiful woman, and also a young orphan. And he tries to leave behind a lot of the demons in his past, but he finds out that he cannot, that he must come to terms with maybe an eventual family in China, with the things which he had tried to leave behind for a long time. For example, I think I mentioned that in my life, and this is also the case of David, who's the name of the protagonist in the novel, he was beaten by his father. I was beaten by my father. My mother was beaten by my father. And, you know, the issue for me was not so much, the thing that I remember most was about my mother, and the ability, when you're a young child, and you're in a situation like that, you see things which you don't understand, but you know that the person who's closest to you is being hurt. And I knew I couldn't protect my mother Now, the thing is that a lot of this was caused by drink. It was caused by alcoholism. And this domestic violence was something that scarred me in many ways through much of my life, in ways that sometimes I did not know. And you see this also in the story. This experience hardened me. It made me ask myself when I was writing this autobiography, hey, Mark, what about the good things in your dad? Did your dad have any good things? And honestly, I remember sending emails and trying to talk to people I knew, and I said, I can't remember any good things about my dad, you know? And there must be good things because there's good things in everybody. And out of that, I said, I can't write an autobiography because it wouldn't be true, because everybody, and my father had some brilliant qualities. I mean, this was a guy who was a goat herder, right? And he lived in a poor family. They didn't have tissue paper. They had, they had leaves, you know, to go to the bathroom with. You know, it was that poor. And the thing is that a long time ago, the hardness, the poverty was very difficult for many people to understand today. But at the same time, he managed to go to Harvard University. And in Harvard University, he was able to achieve. This is a remarkable accomplishment. And I think what it shows is that at the end of the day, you can actually achieve, you can start from scratch. You can actually make your life a little bit different if you can reevaluate yourself to a certain extent, reevaluate your life to a certain extent. And he was able to do that. But the impact on me was that it was very hard for me to connect emotionally with people. When I wrote the diary, what happened is that I wrote a diary in the book because that diary was meant to fill in the gaps which I couldn't find in my own personal experience. At that point, it became a novel.
This was, the diary is the one that the fictitious diary of your father.
Yes, it's the fictitious diary in the book. David receives a diary, and it's a diary that his father has written. And the diary explains a lot of it starts from an event that happened the father himself writes his own recollections. And in that diary, he talks about his mother leaving him at an early age. My father's mother left him at an early age. And this does very strong things, very powerful things to a child's sense of himself and his sense of self-worth. In the diary, when I was writing that diary through David, I wanted to think how this would have impacted his life and how it would have impacted his relationship with women, for example, and with family. And David in the book reads that diary after he seems to break up with his girlfriend, Spring. And after that, he has an epiphany. It's like he realizes, maybe this is why I couldn't connect with her. Maybe this is why we were exchanging dumb emotion for dumb emotion. And I won't reveal the story, but the end of the story, but he persists and he decides to go after her, to not give up on the love that he wants to build in their relationship.
And this is a woman that he met in Shenzhen.
Right.
Okay.
And so he meets this woman in Shenzhen, and he falls in love with her. And they have a turbulent relationship. And they seem to break apart. And what's basically happening is that they're doing things, they're hurting each other, but they don't know where this hurt is coming from. And this goes back to children who have been in domestic violence situation. Remember, the major message that I'm trying to get out here is one about domestic violence.
There are four themes of your book, and I want to get to that.
You've done your research.
I want to get to that in a minute.
Sure.
But I want to just talk about your experiences versus that of the novel. You have this character named David. You're not named David, but one of your best friends here is named David. You had a brother, David, who was lost in a car crash.
Yes.
Or a motorcycle accident, I'm sorry.
Yes, in a motorcycle accident.
During the time the book is written, it's post 9/11. David has lost his job in the U.S. He's turned 43 years old.
Right.
While it seems this, I don't know your age, but I know that this mirrors a lot of your life. You also had lost a job before you moved to Shenzhen right around that time.
Yeah.
So how much of the novel is based on your own experiences? And how's the autobiography going to be different? Because I know that you are writing an autobiography.
Right.
Or you finished completing an autobiography.
Good question. Well, I've just finished completing an autobiography, as you pointed out. And I think in this case, the novel, for example, does strongly track with my own personal life. But also, there are points of imagination. For example, I do not believe, although I may be wrong, that my father ever wrote a diary. Okay, so that's one issue. But at the same time, I think that the general experiences, the search for self-identity, is something that runs through the novel. The major messages, the things are tying very closely with my own life and my own experiences. For example, the themes of domestic violence, the themes of, for example, working to start from scratch. The third one is the issue about service, doing volunteerism, right? All of these three factors, and of course the power of love. These are all themes that go through their lives, and they also go through mine. Right. The one thing about the autobiography that I think may be a little bit interesting is that, first of all, Nairobi to Shenzhen will raise a number of questions, which is very natural because of the connection between the character David and my own life. But it'll raise a lot of questions about my own life. But at the same time, it will also, I believe, focus a great deal on the American experience as well as the Kenyan experience. There's only so much information you can put in a novel or an autobiography, right? And so I was thinking, my thought was that if I can do something that starts from sort of like the Spielberg Star Wars movies, right?
George Lucas.
Right? Yeah. You know what they do? They started with the end of the empire. The empire is destroyed and is a victory, remember? And then it goes back in time. And so what actually happens is that you go back to, I'm not saying this is the same story, but the sequence is you start from the end result and you go back and you try to find out more about why it actually started, get some more details on that. So that's where the autobiography is going to focus on.
And that series is about a son and identity and father.
Really?
Right? Well, Star Wars, right?
Oh yeah. That's true. That's true. But also I want to say something else, and that is that at the same time, I want people to understand the beauty of Kenya and the beauty of Africa, because Africa is a place, people say about Africa and about Kenya, and the Kenyan people are so warm and they're so generous, is that Africa, you don't change Africa, Africa changes you. And there's something about Africa and being brought up in the African experience that I think many people around the world will relate to. And it's something that has to do with the beauty of the natural environment and also the beauty of the people. I talk a little bit about that in the movie, not in the movie, in the book, but you have to read it carefully, and hopefully, I know you're probably very, very busy, but maybe I hope that one day is that if you read it, if you ever happen to read it, look over it again, then maybe you'll see different things that you hadn't noticed the first time.
And this is in the novel, not the autobiography.
In the novel, right.
To get back to the themes, the first theme is domestic violence.
Right.
Why put it out there? Why put it in the book? I mean, there's some people that this is a traumatic experience, a lot of hurt, a lot of pain.
Right.
Why?
For me, this wasn't really a choice. this was something that really I noticed after the fact. My goal was really to talk about the experience. My initial goal, in a sense, was to talk about things which were modeled on my life. The issue of domestic violence really came out sort of that's life. That was my experience. You know, when you're an author or when you're writing a book, there's always that question, where does the author end and the character begin? But how can you write a book if it's not true, if it's not based on your own life? The only person you know the best about is yourself. And so, to a certain extent, you have to draw from your own experiences. And in my case, my experiences happen to revolve at least to an important part of my life and my mother's life around domestic violence. Also, remember, there's a goal here, there's a bigger goal that I was trying to bring out, and that's the issue of trying to make people's lives a little bit better, or help them improve their lives a little bit better. Because I think raising awareness of domestic violence is something which people don't talk about very much. Now, these are not goals that I intended to bring out at the beginning of the book, but you'll notice that I think in the current climate, with the extraordinary events of the past 3 years, I can't help it that what's happened is that obviously this takes on a bigger picture than I had originally intended, right? Because people are looking much more closely at the things that I write now than they did perhaps maybe a few years ago.
But it's because of your half-brother's success.
Because of the extraordinary events that's been occurring around the election and President Obama's election. But the thing is that I made 3 goals this year. The first was I wanted to publish a book, and this would have happened regardless. I would have done this, is publish a book. It sounds corny, but I also wanted to get a reasonably good piano. Okay, I have a rented piano, and I really want to get a good piano.
Yeah.
And the third one was also to raise some money for children. Right. I've always been around kids. So this book was one way to do that.
Right.
But the point is that all of these experiences, to a certain extent, prepared me for this book. Life prepared me for this book.
Now, another theme is the pursuit of one's dreams.
Yes.
Your father.
Thank you for saying that, because that's a, okay. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No. But your father was physically abusive. Your mother was in an unhappy relationship. Your brother David died. That's a lot of hurt. That's a lot of pain. So with all of that, how are you able to pursue your dreams? And what role does this play in the book?
Well, you know, I'm glad you asked that question, because I'll speak generally about me, and then I'll give you some specific things from the book. Because some of this will be in the autobiography, I don't want to talk too much about it. But in my experience, the important thing about going through difficult times is making sure you have some way in which you can express yourself. If you bottle it up, it doesn't do much good. I've been fortunate because my life has been about self-expression, primarily through music, recently through calligraphy, and also through writing. But what I've found out is that because I've been able to, music pulled me through many of the hard times that I had, and also the strong women in my life, like my mother, because she was a beacon for me in many ways, that helped me get through some of those dark times. And then my grandmother, I think I got the music from her in many ways. And about dreams. Dreams to me are things which I don't try to articulate too much. I have my dreams, but those are very personal, very private. There's a tribe in Kenya called the Maasai. I don't know if you know about it. You probably do know. They're very proud people, and they don't, at least until, for many of them, until for recently, they were not willing to let people take photographs of them, because by taking a photograph, they believe that it captures some of your spirit. With me, talking about dreams are a little bit like that. When you discuss them too much, they lose some of their potency. Now, on the other hand, I can say that there are 3 things that I really want to bring out, like the book brings out. I really want to do something to help children.
Right.
Okay?
And that's the spirit of service.
That's the spirit of service. And that's the 15% of the money of this book is going to go to that. In fact, most of the media appearances that I've made have only been in that context. So I really wanted to make sure that there's something involved with that. The other thing also is the ability to start your life. I want to, people who have lost their job right now, people who have lost their job, they're in tough times right now. They're trying to evaluate, where does my life actually begin? What should I do now that I'm in this difficult situation? I want them to know that there are ways you can actually start again. And the third thing is, like I said, to raise the awareness of domestic violence, because I believe that this is something which needs to be talked about more. These are themes which I did not intend, but they happen to come out of the book.
Now, the spirit of service, well, there are a lot of charities out there.
Yes.
Why did you decide to volunteer your time to help orphan children, and did your childhood have something to do with that?
Gosh, Dan, you know, this is something which I really don't know. I really don't know the answer to that question. Maybe I'll find out, through good questions like yours.
Well, I mean, we'll be talking more, hopefully.
Yeah, maybe we shall. But the thing is that I think part of it is that orphan children, in a sense, they represent a lot of the loneliness that sometimes happens to people who are in emotional situations, emotionally hurting, who are being emotionally hurt. And I think they have no parents, or the people who have tried to help them have not been there for them. And I think, to some extent, this does reflect on my own experiences. But at the same time, it's not just orphan children. I think children in general are people whom we need to really pay more attention to, or it would be better if we paid more attention than we do right now, because they are the future. They carry on the good things or the less than good things that we happen to experience every day. If we can try to, for example, if we can make their lives fuller, this is something which is good for everybody. I'll tell you something else, and that is that I have one student, and someone told me before, Mark, after he started to learn to play piano, his self-confidence increased dramatically. A lot of these children don't have very high degrees of self-confidence. And life is more than just putting clothes on a child's back, and also putting clothes on their back and giving them food. It's also about letting them know that there is beauty in the world. And if you can give a child, in a sense, a lot of these children don't know these things. They don't know what music is. They don't know the music is beautiful. If you can let them know early enough that they can make music, it's something that can stay with them the rest of their lives. And it gives them a fullness, an awareness that they can see things. It makes their life richer, and their life richer, the people around them richer too. And I think that's something which I have been trying to do in my own way.
And that leads us to the fourth, which is the power of love.
Okay.
And it's a theme within your book. Are you talking about finding the love within yourself, or is it from an outside? Is it an outside love? Is it a love of God? What is this power of love? And also, wanted to know, from what I read, you married a woman who's from China, and how much has she changed your life? And how has she made you better?
Right. Oh gosh, my wife is my angel. She sees the demons in me, and she makes me see myself in ways that she makes me understand myself much more. I think that's what my best friend, a person who loves you, that's what love is about, is someone who helps you in those dark moments and actually helps you understand yourself more. And I think the one thing is that the power of love in the book, love is a hard thing to get your hands around. Okay, it's hard to define what love is sometimes. And in the book, I explore love on a number of levels. One is the issue of a love between a father and a son, or the absence of it. The other is the love between a mother and a son. And in the book, there's the mother also trying to communicate through David through letters and emails and so forth. There's the love between a grandmother and her grandchildren. There's the story in China of a woman who, during a great famine, she had only one mantou each day that she could actually share with her children. And she had seven children, 70 people in the family, and one mantou to eat. And she had to cut them into pieces. This is a story in the book. And I asked her, this is based on an actual story that I had actually encountered. I asked this, anyway, in the book, David asks this woman, well, do you give the smallest child a bigger piece than, say, your husband? Did you do that? She said, no, we can't do that, because everyone would fight. Everybody got exactly the same size slice of that one mantou. And David asks her, what makes you go through this? And she said, I went through it because I love my family. I want to keep my family together. So there's this love between the family. And then there's also the love between David and his orphan student, Jen Ray. You see, so what I was trying to explore is love in a number of ways.
That's more of a fondness for the student, right? Or is there actually a love interest?
It's a sort of paternal love.
Okay.
It's a paternal love
right.
that he feels responsible for the child, and he wants to help. Maybe that's a son that he never had, right? Maybe it's a son that maybe he wants to have. Maybe he wants Jen Ray to be to him a son, like he was never he wished his father had been a son to him, had been a father to him in his own way. So all of these things. So you see what happens here, Dan, is that I'm trying to show a different number of levels between love. You know, there's the saying in Chinese, 温故而知新, right? 温故而知新, which basically means that every time you go over something, you discover something new. That was one goal in the book, so there'll be various levels.
In Guangzhou last week,
yes,
you said that you have finally come to terms with your past and your family name. You've now even placed Obama back in your name. Why?
You know, for a long time, I wanted nothing to do with the Obama name, because I had gone through so much at that time that was painful and was hard. And what happened is that over the past 4 years or so, I saw this tremendous movement. This was one of it, part of it. Being in China was another part of it, because it put me out of my comfort zone. But what happened is I saw this tremendous movement of people, movement from fear towards hope. I saw, for example, at Grand Park, the night of the election, I saw tears in people's eyes. I saw people crying. And it was not just in America, it was around the world. A friend told me about a lady he met here in China, and she said to him, that day I saw CNN on TV. This is a Chinese woman. I started crying when I saw that. Let's remember that. You see, the thing is that this was a global thing, and people moved from this atmosphere of fear and being afraid and afraid of being hurt, to one where maybe there's something, possibilities. And this was also reflected on a personal level, because I saw that. And actually, it didn't start there. Some reports are maybe saying that it started there. It actually started before then, because, my brother Barack, President Obama, had been sharing this message for some time. And I remember one time I met him in Austin, and I flew there one night, and it was my wife who opened me up. I woke up in the middle of the night one evening. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning. This is about the time of the debate with Hillary Clinton, I believe. And I had a nightmare. I was thinking about my brother. And I won't go into the details of the nightmare, but my wife was beside me. And she said, Mark, you're dreaming about your brother. And if she hadn't been there, I would have just gone straight back to bed. Really. But she said, Mark, you got to go and see your brother. And what happened is that we were separated. It's difficult contacting because it's so far away. But this is 6,000 miles, 6,000 miles away. She said, you got to go and see your brother. The very next day, the very next week, I flew to Austin to see him, and we hugged, and I shared some of my own calligraphy with him, But the thing is that this is part of that reevaluation. You start to look at yourself, and you also, these global movements, they actually have impacts on you personally. And this had impacted me personally. And it was out of this crucible of experiences that this book, Nairobi to Shenzhen, was born.
I've read that you and your wife will be meeting with President Obama soon. Right. In Shanghai.
Well, okay.
Are you going to present him with a copy of the book? Has he seen the book? I mean, what are you going to say to your half-brother?
For now, let's just say that my plan is to introduce my wife to President Obama. She is his greatest fan.
Right.
And I think the one thing that I would want the American people or people in general to know about China is that China is about family.
Yeah.
And the people are warm.
Yeah.
They're caring. They're tremendous, gracious hosts. And my brother already knows this, but I'm sure he will appreciate it even more by being here among them.
Right. This one I know might be a little too personal for you, but I'm dying to know. It deals with dreams from my father and the passage that your brother wrote about you. He sort of almost nailed exactly what you're saying, just that you weren't ready to come to terms with the past. Was it uncomfortable to read those words, to be in a best-selling novel? And do you? Well, why don't you answer?
Autobiography.
Okay, so we'll find that out.
We'll find that out in the autobiography.
Okay.
Thank you.
So once again, okay. Well, then, what is your relationship like with your brother? Can you just say? I mean, are you guys close?
I'll pass on that one.
Will that also be explained in the autobiography?
Yes. Okay. In fact, but thank you for sharing that, Dan. What I do want to do is talk a little more in more detail about some of the things about our family. Yeah. And so, yes, one of the things I do want to do is also tell my story too. Right. So, I don't not to have other people tell my story for me.
Okay. That's fine.
Great.
But hopefully you can trust me with that one day.
Hey, one day.
This is sort of some lightning round questions here.
Okay.
And I know you're a private person. I do have some personal questions, some fun, some serious.
Sure.
There are around 11 of them. If they're too personal, just say pass it on to the next one. Okay?
Well, I'll try.
How old are you?
Younger than Barack.
What is your favorite movie?
Probably Metropolis.
Fritz Lang. What is your favorite book that is not written by you?
Probably La Nausée by Sartre.
What is your biggest flaw, your biggest fear, or your biggest vice?
I'll pass on that one.
Is World Nexus, your online communications design company, still up and running?
I'll pass on that.
Do you have a stake in a Chinese barbecue chicken chain in Shenzhen?
I'll pass on that.
From what I understand, your mom is Jewish, and your father is a non-practicing Muslim. How much does religion factor into your life?
I'll pass on that one.
What would you tell a child or mother who's the victim of domestic violence?
I would say, that's a good question. I would say for that recognize it. Recognize it. Don't try to minimize it. Try to understand it, because be aware of it. And then I think once you accept it, that it actually is a domestic violence, sometimes things fall into place afterwards.
Why Shenzhen?
Oh, why Shenzhen? Why Shenzhen? That's a good question. Why not Shenzhen? Shenzhen to me is a city that has many virtues. It's many good things about it, and I think sometimes, I think part of the reason I've seen this in the book, for example, as you see in the book through David's eyes, is because I have had a chance to live here longer than some other people. And so I think what happens is that it's like if you're riding a bicycle rather than riding a car. If you ride a bicycle down a street, you see a lot more of the street than if you're riding a car. There's a story in the book in Nairobi to Shenzhen about a woman who falls in love. And she falls in love with her husband because he's so wonderful with bicycles. And what happens is she loves the way that he can push a bicycle, and the bicycle can continue by itself for at least 50 meters without falling, okay? And she looks at his back and she says, I loved his back when I saw him pushing that bicycle, and his confidence. Eventually, she punctures her own bicycle tire. She's in school, okay? She's in high school. That's when they fell in love. And he comes over and she makes an excuse for him to come and fix the bicycle. And then he takes her home on the bicycle.
Right.
And as she's riding on the bicycle, she's seeing all of these things passing by her on the street. And it's these details that you see. In the book, there are many details about Shenzhen. One of the things is that it's a city that's made up of many, many people from all over China. It's very close to Hong Kong, which makes it great if you're interested in maybe something cosmopolitan. And at the same time, it's a beautiful place which shows the contrast between the old and the new China. But for more of that, I would suggest that the best thing to do is to actually go and read the book.
Okay. If you can say one thing to your father, what would that be?
I don't hate you. I'm not bitter, but I wish we had had a chance to know more about each other. And I know you did some amazing things, and at least now I understand a bit more about you.
What's your favorite American baseball team?
I'll pass on that.
Beethoven or Mozart, and why?
Beethoven and Mozart?
Beethoven or Mozart, and why?
I would say for me, gosh, that's an interesting question. Beethoven or Mozart, and why? For me, if I had to focus, I'm going to pass on that one.
Okay.
I'm going to pass on that
Really?
one. Yes, I'm going to pass on that
Okay.
one. But I'll say read the book.
Read the book, okay. Many of our viewers on the mainland probably would like to hear you speak a little Putonghua. Is there any way that you can tell them something from your heart or about your book?
I can say that 关于我的书是关于中国，和我非常喜欢，我非常感谢中国人，因为他们一直支持了我，一直给我非常多的帮忙，特别是中国的文化，我非常珍惜中文，和改天我会写一本书，我打算写一本书关于《红楼梦》。我觉得《红楼梦》是一个伟大的小说，和我也觉得我们应该帮助我们是应该的，互相帮助我们是应该的，所以我非常喜欢中国人帮助需要帮助的人。中国有一句话，山上若水，这个是非常重要。
For people who don't speak Mandarin.
Okay.
Can you just give a little sense of what you said?
Yeah. I basically said that I really much appreciate the Chinese people for giving me the opportunity to live, to work here in China, and help me through my times while I've been here. Also, I think one thing is that I hope that I plan in the future to maybe write a book centering around Hong Lo Meng, the great Chinese classic. And lastly, I would like everyone to know that charity is like water. It drops and then it spreads. And if we can do something to help other people, help people who require helping, then I think that'll make the world a much, much better place.
Well, thank you so much for your time. This was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.